And welcome to another great episode of Retrovaniacs. As always, I am Jeremy Parmentier here with Jeremy Gregory.
Hey there.
And Billy Holiday.
Hello.
Who has been a little under the weather, so hopefully he doesn't cut out or just start coughing and hang up. But hopefully he'll be here for the whole episode. It's a little bit why we're late this episode, but that's okay, because we had some articles on Retrovania.net. Remember to check out Retrovania.net whenever you're not sure what's going on with the podcast. So before we get started with our game for the week, which is Xmen for the Sega Genesis, what have you been playing since last time, Billy?
Well, I'll tell you, like you said, I've been under the weather a bit, so I've been kind of bedridden for a while now, and it allowed me to play through further, as I was last week, played through the Division a little bit more, and I've reached the maximum level on there. I finished what's essentially the majority of the content, what is right now the final storyline mission. But fortunately, they've got a good bit of in-game stuff right now. Some of the missions you can go through and play an increased difficulty level, which is actually a lot of fun to go through and do, especially some of the earlier missions that were kind of easy the first time around. There's a lot more strategy involved now. And there's a new currency system that comes into effect where you buy just very high-level gear. So I'm just doing a lot of that right now. It's kind of a farming phase at the moment, but it's a lot of fun. And I just can't say enough good things about that game. I am quite glad I picked it up, kind of spur of the moment, and that I succumbed to Jeremy Gregory and his peer pressure yet again. He didn't steer me wrong this time, and he didn't steer me wrong again with the other game I've been playing, which was Street Fighter V. I finally picked up, and I enjoy the Division also because I think I'm actually really good at it, which never happens with newer games. I'm always just mediocre or fair enough, and I typically just hold the group down. Street Fighter V, I am not good at. So much has changed as far as some of the returning characters and the way they control now and their style. But it's a lot of fun to play, and we had a group get together, and the online portion, which apparently was originally not working well, is now working well, and I've had a good time with it so far. Just trying to learn it feels like I have to relearn the ropes on there.
Yeah, I'm not very good at any of those fighters, nor do I have a system that can play Street Fighter V, but I will have one soon. I keep saying I'm going to buy a PS4, but before the next episode, Dark Souls 3 will be out, so I will have a PS4, and at that point I'll also probably check out Street Fighter V. I've never been good at Street Fighter, so I guarantee I'll be bad at this one. But since last show, to get ready for a new system, I tried to find some games on my older systems that I either am at the very end of and are close to beating, or something I never really put the time into. So I did finish yet another game. I actually finished South Park Stick of Truth. Great game whole way through, but there's absolutely no replayability on it. I can't see another reason to play that at all. It was fun. I enjoyed it, but even with a different class, it's going to be the exact same game the entire way through. There's not a lot of optional content that you'd want to do. But I still really liked it. But then I also had, for the Wii, I had downloaded Pandora's Tower, which is the third game in the Operation Rainfall, where they're trying to get the last couple Japanese Wii games to come out here, and they all finally did. So it's Last Story, Xenoblade Chronicles, and Pandora's Tower. And I loved the other two of them. So once Pandora's Tower was for download for $20 or something, I picked it up, played a few minutes, and was like, yeah, this is a lot like Zelda, and never picked it up again. So now I'm playing through it now. I'm about 50% through it. It's really good. It's like Zelda with just temples. There's no real overworld to speak of, but the temples are far more involved than most of the Zelda temples, and the bosses are more, I don't want to say Dark Souls-y because it's not quite what they are, but it's more Dark Souls kind of bosses than a Zelda boss. Like a Zelda boss, you find an item in the labyrinth and you assume that's what you're going to use to defeat the boss, where in this case, you pretty much have one weapon the whole time that you use to fight all the bosses. It's like a chain that you use to wrap around things and pull them off guys. It's really, really good. I was surprised how much I liked it. I read a lot of kind of average reviews saying it was just sort of a Zelda clone and nothing too exciting there compared to the other two games. in that sort of series. But I think it's probably my favorite game I've played in a long time.
I'm actually really excited that you beat a game. This is one of the things that is like the as long as this podcast has been going, I think you have started dozens more games than me and Billy have ever started, and very rarely do we ever get the I beat this game announcement. So thank God you made it through South Park. That's a great game though.
It's a short game, and that's the other reason why I beat it. I was able to I think I put 8 hours into it, and it was over. So that was nice, since I keep starting 90 to 100-hour role-playing games over and over and over again. So I'll have to find some more shorter games. I know whenever I get my PS4, I'm getting the one with the Uncharted. So those are kind of short, too. I should be able to finish a couple of those before I fall into Dark
Is this a
Souls.
solid... Like, you're actually getting a PS4 this time? Can we put this running joke to bed?
Well, I think I'm not going to lose my job. So I think I've got money to afford a PS4 right now. I've just got to convince my wife that I can buy it. So I'll be there. By the 12th, when Dark Souls 3 comes out, I will have that system.
All right. Well, we will hold you to your word. In the next podcast, if you don't have a PS4, there's going to be repercussions.
I'll have to pick all the games from here on out, so I can just get berated every week. What have you been playing, Jeremy?
Well, if I sound like I'm sick, it's because I'm actually recovering from Street Fighter V night that Billy mentioned last night. We actually had several people come on there and play as a group in the lobbies, which now support 8 players, which before they only supported 2 when it launched, which was just ridiculous. There's no reason to even have a lobby if you can only have 2 people in it. But now it's got an 8-player lobby, and had a good amount of people in there playing, and really, really had way too much alcohol while we were playing that. So I am feeling the effects of that today. But I will say that Street Fighter V is really good. And I can understand why people wouldn't want to pay the $60 price tag for that, because it's got a ways to go. But the fighting that's in there right now is so much fun that it's really, once you get into it with a group like that, it's really hard to put it down. I think we went on for well over 2 hours and just had a ton of fun playing that. And I can't recommend it enough. Like I said, it's lacking in things that are slowly being added. But if you can get it, for maybe about $50-$40, I think it's a really good buy for what it is right now.
Well, there is one more game we've all been playing, and I didn't really want to talk about it, but I think it's the dumbest thing I've played in years. We've all been playing Miitomo, which isn't even a game. I don't know what you'd call this. It's kind of it's if when the original Wii, with Mii's came out, this kind of should have been there at the beginning. So that's 10 years ago? And instead now it's out as a phone app where you basically make your own Mii, and then you just talk about yourself, and people come over and you talk about each other. It's the dumbest thing that I've played in forever, yet I keep playing it.
Oh, it's so weird.
Yeah, it's very, and I guess I didn't play the Tamagotchi Life that came out for the 3DS, but it seemed similar to that vein. That seemed like you just kind of walk in on people's houses or walk in on people and they say, hey, what's going on, and you discuss things. It seems like a version of that, but it's weird. It's dumb. It's all the above on that, but it's also just strangely addictive, and I have spent way too much time accessorizing and fixing up my wardrobe.
There's something really weird about just having your Mii ask you how many people you think you're going to date in your lifetime. That you just sit there and you're just like, I don't know. I don't want to answer these questions to you.
I inflated the number greatly because I wanted to try to impress you.
I saw, yes. And I think that's really the weird thing about this. It is kind of just a social kind of game. But, if you're thinking it's like Facebook or something where you go on there and you see everybody's status updates, it's not like that at all. I mean, you essentially just get asked a question by your Mii. They'll ask you, what's your favorite type of bread? And you answer it, and then that's it. And once somebody else either comes to visit your Mii or they decide to look at your Mii or something like that, that question may come up, or their answer may come up, and they'll know what kind of bread you like, and they can comment on that or put a picture in there or something. It's really stupid. But it's just fun to sit down and click on a few people every now and again and see what, stupid answers they've come up with.
Well, right. It's coming up with the dumbest answer, and surprisingly, because it's Nintendo, I'm shocked that it's not filtered at all. I mean, I haven't tried specific words. I'm not going to drop the N-bomb on my Miitomo, but generally, I've said a lot of stuff on the Mii just to see what if it would blank it out or say you can't say that. Nope, doesn't matter what I've put in so far. It'll come up because I'll get comments from people on it. So clearly, it's being seen. But yeah, it's definitely weird. And I thought, you're in those tickets. You're in tickets in the game just for meeting people and answering questions. So I thought, okay, here's where the game is. You're doing all this other stuff just to get tickets, and then you're going to play a cool game with tickets. But no, it's just basically pachinko for hats. I don't understand at all why.
I mean, I can deal with that, but yeah, there's not much of an actual game there. I mean, that's really all there is right now. I'm sure they'll add more over time.
Did you link it to your Nintendo account?
I did.
Yeah.
So it's worth it for that. You do earn free games slowly by doing the Wii missions, or not the Wii missions, but the Miitomo missions. If you do get 1,000 points, I guess you can start downloading free games, and most of them are just kind of 3DS games, or I guess the big one is the Twilight Princess Picross. That's the only way you can get it is by downloading it, I think.
Oh, weird.
And that's 1,000 points. But if you just set up your account and tie it to a Facebook account and put it on your Nintendo account, you've already got 500 coins, and you'll earn probably 50 to 100 coins a day just answering questions and letting people like your answers. It's really stupid, but at the same time, I guess that added bonus of getting to download games, I'm in. I'm 100% in. I've checked it probably 20 times today.
Yeah, it goes along with whatever. This is the replacement for Club Nintendo, this new site they have up. And yeah, as of now, there aren't a lot of ways to earn points. I don't know how it's going to work, if there's going to be, you get a certain amount of points, you reach a level, and at the end of the year, you get, whatever they're handing out prize-wise. I don't know how it's working right now, but this is pretty much seems like for a few minutes a day, you can go ahead and earn these points that are going to go towards, like, Jeremy P. said, there's a couple of free things up there now, but who knows what in the future. I think this is perfect for just for just a bathroom trip. Just a few minutes every day. You catch up on there. You answer a few questions. You comment on a couple things. You play that pachinko game and try to win your 4th or 5th cat scarf, and then you go along your way.
That's sadly exactly what you do. That's it. That's pretty much the game in a nutshell. They should ask us to help advertise it.
Yes. Answer some questions, comment on things, win a cat scarf.
So if you're friends with any of us on Facebook or Twitter, you can find us and friend us on Miitomo, and you can ask us all about this week's game, Xmen for the Sega Genesis. Now, this is the first X-Men game, I think, that came out that was not pure garbage. The only X-Men games I had played before were the X-Men game on Nintendo, which could be one of the worst games of all time, because it's LJN, so you already know it's bad. You don't even have to look into it anymore. But it's also, just find a YouTube of it and watch it, and it's just garbage. There's also a Wolverine game that was just a little bit better than the X-Men game, but still not really very good. And then I think there was Spider-Man X-Men Arcade's Revenge, which was better than both those previous games, but still pretty terrible. And then this came out in 1993, and this is kind of the X-Men game you'd want.
Oh, I never, as big a comic fan as I was, and I was actively reading X-Men at this point, I skipped this game over. And part of that is what you're talking about. Around this time, back on the NES, I would play anything and almost always enjoy it. And I played that original X-Men game. And even by my admittedly low standards as a kid, I hated that thing. It was a one-time rental. I didn't finish it. And it's around that time when 16-bit came around, I started to wisen up to the video games that were licensed after properties I otherwise loved. Anything movie-based. I played through Total Recall on the NES. I was blinded back then. But this is about the time I wisened up, and just when I saw another X-Men game, just the memories of that original one stuck in there, and I skipped this one over.
If you were alive back then, there was this moment in time where suddenly X-Men was the hottest thing ever. And it was because I believe it was that Saturday morning cartoon. It got huge. Like suddenly everyone loved X-Men. And this was the first game that was released that was basically based on the cartoon. And plus it was developed by and published by Sega. So you knew there had to be some sort of quality there. This wasn't the LJN, stamp of horribleness. But this really looked like it could be the X-Men game that you've been waiting for. It had 2-player co-op. It looked great. This was finally going to be it. And I think for the most part, if that's what you're looking for, this ain't too bad.
Well, again, unlike the original X-Men game that we all were scarred horribly by in our childhoods, it's so bad I'm not even going to pick it as a game. That's how bad that is, because normally, apparently, I have terrible taste. But this game, the X-Men actually play differently, which is nice. Each X-Men actually has their own unique powers, like the X-Men should. If you play as Cyclops, you have your eye beam. If you play as Wolverine, you can pull your claws out and do a lot more damage, but as you use your claws, that's part of your energy bar, so you can't just run out with your claws all the time. Each character has their own unique skills and abilities that make some of the levels easier depending on who you have. Unlike, again, the original X-Men game, everyone seems to be exactly the same and not an X-Men. So this was nice. I was not a huge X-Men fan. I mean, I did read a lot of comics, but X-Men was kind of my brother's thing. I only liked terrible comics like Fantastic Four and Thor. So I was not a big X-Men fan, but everybody knows and likes the X-Men. Why would you not want to play a game where you're Wolverine? I mean, Wolverine's the coolest comic character ever just in what he can do. And this actually kind of feels right when you're playing it.
It does.
Yeah, and all the characters look great, and they don't seem to, in a lot of those early LJN games, it seemed to punish you if you wanted to do what, the X-Men could do, if you wanted to use Wolverine's claws or something like that. This one, I mean, you've got a power bar that you can use that's separate. You can use your X-Men powers or mutant powers, but it doesn't. You get to use those a good deal before it goes down. So I mean, this always felt fun to play the characters that were in the game.
Yeah, and it looks great. I mean, still picture wise, if you were just to look at a couple of shots of this, there's no way you could pass this one up. It looks good. They look. I mean, of course, it's not the quality of the actual animated series, but it's not bad, especially on the Genesis. And yeah, you get 4 different characters. Each one, Wolverine has the claw, so he's kind of a melee up close type. You get your projectile guys, of course, Cyclops, which you can fire that thing, and I was very pleased in 8 different directions. I was pleased it was not a straight head-on type thing, as a lot of those, the platformers had as far as shooting, and Nightcrawler, who, I love Nightcrawler, but I couldn't get the hang of him in this game, and Gambit, who is kind of, I don't know, to me, kind of hit or miss. I think he's got probably the worst jump out of all of them. But yeah, each character kind of has his own thing, and one thing I thought was unique is you can swap out, and I think it might be limited in stages how many times you can do this, but if one guy's low on health, you can call, or you're somewhere and let's say you have Wolverine, but it would pay off to have somebody that can shoot from a distance. You can bring Cyclops in if you want, and I thought that was very unique also.
I don't know if there's a limit to how many times you can do it in a level, but they definitely continuously have their own unique life and energy bars. So if you use Wolverine until he's almost dead and switch to Nightcrawler, and then Nightcrawler's almost dead and you switch back to Wolverine, he'll have his original low life bar and energy bar until you get back to, I guess, the center area of the game, which is the, what's the name of their training room?
The Danger Room.
The Danger Room. You go back to what's clearly the Danger Room, where you can get some health upgrades and things in between levels before you go back into what's still the Danger Room, but a different level in the Danger Room. The story is essentially that someone has made the Danger Room far more dangerous than it needs to be, and you have to fight your way through the Danger Room levels to figure out who did it. And
I wonder who it is.
Unsurprisingly, it is. Now, here's a question. Is it Magneto or Magneto?
I always said Magneto.
I did too.
I always said Magneto, but you will occasionally catch that other pronunciation of it. And I guess those people just clearly are wrong and have no idea what they're talking about.
Okay, well then we'll go with Magneto, and if someone thinks we're wrong, they can write us all about it on Miitomo. But But yeah, so you find out that unsurprisingly it's Magneto, and so then you fly up to Asteroid M to take him on for the last level of the game. There's 5 levels total in this. They're kind of long, but 5 levels total. I'm surprised you didn't like Nightcrawler. I thought Nightcrawler was hands down the best guy.
I couldn't get the hang of it with him. I just couldn't.
He lets you skip through parts of the levels. If there's the first level is the one that was the most obvious because there's some switches you need to find. They aren't hard to find, but they're still out of the way to open up stone doorways, or you can just teleport through them. So that's what I did instead. And you can make it through the first level in like a minute and a half with your teleport.
Yeah, Nightcrawler is basically the guy that you want to use in this game because, I mean, if you're using anybody else, you have to go through the level with how it's making you go. With Nightcrawler, you can actually use his mutant power to go through walls. And that makes this game so much better because these stages are in the... I don't know what it was with Sega and their love for giant maze-like stages. But that's really what every stage in this game is. It's just a giant maze that you're going around to try to find your way through, finding buttons, finding little things here and there that open up passages. And this is by far the worst thing about this game, in my opinion.
It clearly is. And I thought I was really going to hate this game based off the first level because it does something in a platformer I hate. And it's that thing where you can't tell where you're supposed to jump. The platforms you're supposed to jump on they so closely resemble the background that there are so many just blind jumps in this first level. And it's not that bad the rest of the game. The first level, mainly, if you can make it through there, you won't have to deal with that so much. But yeah, I was getting pretty heated during my first playthrough of it on that first level. It's one of my pet peeves of these platformers.
At least in this game, if you jump into a hole, you get teleported out, or not teleported, but Jean Grey shows up and pulls you out of the pit. I think you lose a little bit of life, but I never died fully from jumping into a hole. The downside, though, in that first level is there's definitely a good series of jumps where you jump into spikes, and those she can't help you on. You fall into the spikes and you just keep taking damage till you get off of them, which is a pain in the butt. But again, if you're using Nightcrawler and you miss a jump, you just teleport till you find a platform. And as long as you have some light, some energy left, you're good to go. But the other thing with the jumps in this game, I found there's a lot of platforms that I would jump through. It would look on to me like I landed perfectly, but then I'd fall right through the side of it. It didn't happen too often, but often enough that it was irritating me to some levels where I was like, I'm going to take a break from this and come back when I'm not going to throw this controller.
It didn't help the platforming. I mean, the platforming itself isn't very fun. The characters are kind of large, and you can't really see too much around you. But it definitely doesn't help when you go in for a jump that looks like you're literally going to land on the edge of this platform, and you just go straight through it. And that happened probably a lot more for me, I guess, than you, because at some point I was like, this is a problem. This is just to the point where I'm about to just stop playing this because I keep falling through platforms.
I think it's because I use Nightcrawler so much. There was a lot of times where if I just got frustrated, I would just teleport across the screen just to do it. So that probably helped get rid of a lot of my frustration. So along with the 4 characters you can choose to play as your normal characters, Cyclops, Wolverine, Nightcrawler, and Gambit, you can summon helpers that come in that essentially just damage all the characters on the screen, or they fly across the screen and hurt people that are in a line with them. So that you can use Rogue, Iceman, Archangel, and Storm. I thought that was a pretty cool touch. Storm was always the one I'd want to use because that's the hit everything on the screen. The other one's kind of you have to be in the right place at the right time to make them as good as they should be. The thing I liked and didn't like about this game, when I first played it, if you want to really play Cyclops, let's say, and you get through and Cyclops dies, you don't come back with a new life as Cyclops. You go back to the Danger Room and you pick one of the remaining X-Men, and your game ends when you're out of X-Men. You can find, those pickups that get those characters back through the levels. But when I was first trying to play this and I was determined to use Wolverine all the time, and then I would die a couple times, I'm like, oh, why would I want to use these other guys? They're so different from each other. It's kind of hard if you don't bother learning all 4 characters to just pick up where you left off with another guy. But then the more I thought about it, the more I like that. That's a lot more realistic than, you die and then all of a sudden you come back with life number 2 with Wolverine. So right. I like that you don't have a number of lives. You just have how many X-Men are around.
Yeah, I think it's set up, really well. It kind of reminds me of the NES Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, where you had, your one pool of turtles, and, they all had their separate life bars and everything like that. And you could always switch back and forth how you wanted, but it makes you feel like you've actually got a team of other people there instead of just respawning over and over and over again. And I think that was the one thing about this that I really enjoyed as a kid was, everyone felt like they were part of the X-Men team and everybody was working together.
Oh yeah, I think the team dynamic, this game certainly, and for such an early title, back in the 16-bit era, this game really, you really had that sense of teamwork about it, with everybody having their own kind of unique thing, and sometimes you had to switch out, and you had to rely on different characters. You couldn't play through this on, I don't believe, according to you guys, you can take Nightcrawler pretty far through, but yeah, when I tried mainly playing as Wolverine, because of course Wolverine is everybody's favorite. But yeah, I tried to play through mainly as him, and I found, there are some times where I would have to get somebody out with some range, and yeah, sometimes I would have to get Nightcrawler and try to traverse across the level. And I really did enjoy that. And what did you guys think about the boss fights? I found that the boss fights, they started off very simple, very easy. There's usually a pattern of, most of the bosses were invulnerable in one state, but they had openings where you could jump in and hit them. But then, around stage 4 or so, they really ramped it up.
Yeah, I thought the first level's boss was super easy. So Juggernaut isn't really the boss. He shows up in the middle of the first level, and you can fight him, but you can also just go away, and you can continue on your way without beating him. I didn't know if that was like a glitch, but then it kept happening over and over again, so I thought, okay, I guess I just don't have to beat him. So I don't even know who the last boss was. I'm not the best with X-Men characters since I wasn't a huge fan, so I don't know who that enemy was at the end of the first level. But that was one that, it's very clear. They appear, they shoot an attack, and then they stand there for a second so you can hit them. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty standard 8 and 16-bit era boss fight. But I thought that was a pretty easy boss. I didn't beat this game. I did not have the patience to beat this game. I enjoyed it. When I played through it, I got through about level 3, and then I said, I'm going to watch a Let's Play on the rest of this game and save myself the time and frustration. Because, again, I kept, while the jumping thing didn't cause me to completely quit as fast as it could have, where I kept going through the platforms, eventually I was just done with it. I could not handle that. But that's also, again, I'm playing on emulation, so I'm not sure if that's kind of a problem with emulation or if the Genesis would exactly feel the exact same way.
Yeah, and I made it. I didn't finish this one either. I came real close. I made it to the last level, the asteroid. And then it was a resurgence of a lot of my problems from the first level. And the asteroid stage, you've got it's maze-like again, and there's moving platforms, there's precise jumps, things that I don't think this game was made to really pull off, control-wise and mechanics-wise. It gets a little too demanding based on what they're giving you to work with.
Yeah, for me, it was just the maze-like levels. I've never been a fan of those ever. It kind of comes back to when we were playing, that one game was like Neo or something. That one had very large maze-like levels as well, and I've never been a fan of those, and this has it in spades, especially as when you start getting later in those stages where you are just you're just walking around this place forever trying to figure out where to go. And I just get bored. As a kid, I really loved this because, you could play as X-Men. You could play the two-player co-op. I remember me and my cousin playing this a lot back then, but playing it now, I just can't get past these levels, and even with it just doesn't feel good to play. Even though all the X-Men feel like X-Men, they've got their moves and all that stuff. Hitting people just feels weird. It's like you're not actually even hitting them. It's just you punch or something and they explode. There's no satisfaction to hitting anyone. Same with the bosses. You're just putting throwing out your fist and they'll just kind of back up a little bit and do it all over again. So the only real satisfaction in this game for me now is that the X-Men they play like the X-Men. They look like the X-Men. The game still looks great, but I just don't enjoy playing this game anymore.
Well, I think the sequel, X-Men Clone Wars, X-Men 2 Clone Wars, is a much more like an arcade-style beat-em-up. I think that's much more what I thought this was going to be when I first tried it. Because, the X-Men arcade game that was like the Turtles arcade game was super fun, but it was fairly mindless. Yes, all the X-Men had their own powers and they were different, but still, it was a brawler, and it played like a brawler. I think X-Men 2 is a lot closer to that. This I like because, you compared it earlier actually to the original NES Turtles game in the way that you have each of your characters and they die and you have to go find them. I think it's a very similar sort of game in that you take a property that has a game that's comparable in the arcade to something that to be super fun with multiple players. It's kind of mindless, but for arcades, we were going to pay a quarter to play it over and over again, or 50 cents. You don't want something that's as involved as this game is. This took that formula and tried to add those mazes to make it longer and add bosses that take a little more thought than a beat 'em up would. But unlike the Turtles game, I still think this is actually pretty fun. That first Turtles game is painfully not fun. This is definitely better than that. The collision detection is better. There's no level where you swim underwater and get hit by seaweed. It's a much better game than the original Turtles game. What I'd say actually compared this to, you said you compared it to Little Nemo. It kept making me think of Blackthorn, and I don't know why, because it doesn't play like Blackthorn at all, but I think it's just because it looks like Blackthorn.
Kind of, yeah.
And it sounds like poop. The music on this game is terrible. Ooh. I mean, it's fine for while you're playing the game. At no point did I say, this music is pretty bad, but listening to the music to try to pick stuff for the episode, it's terrible. It's not good to listen to. It's not enjoyable. I'm definitely going to have some clips in here, but I apologize for those now. They're all pretty dull. It's pretty droning. It just goes on and on and on. It's not lively. You're not going to hum anything from this game.
And I don't mean to offend any huge fans out there, but that's the Genesis. I mean, essentially, this is, that early Genesis, or, the entire length of the Genesis life. That sound is just super tinny. A lot of sounds are just much louder than they need to be. And one thing I can't forgive in the sound department is Wolverine's claws. When you swipe with those, how hard would it be? How hard would it be for, a nice swoosh or a nice, or whatever? But you just get this tinny. It's like a snippet of a cat howl, just a real brief, like quarter-second snippet of it. And the music in this one, but that's the Sega Genesis for you. I've never been a fan of the Genesis music-wise, except Streets of Rage 2.
I mean,
as I get older, I've come to appreciate the Genesis sound a hell of a lot more than I did as a kid, because I hated it as a kid. But, now I can deal with it, but this is definitely one of those games that just does not do the Sega Genesis sound processor any favors. It is grinding and just metallic, and I feel bad for any listeners that gets that first that music that boots up with the game that's like blam, and just like right into your brain. You really can't go to sleep for at least 48 hours after you hear that one really loud. So it does not sound good at all.
So I guess in general, would you recommend this game to someone who hasn't played it? Let's go this way. Would you recommend it to someone who's a fan of the X-Men, and would you just recommend it to a game fan?
That's a tough call. I think if someone is a fan of the X-Men and they're a retro game fan, I think it's worth going back to look at, because of some of the things it did do that were, kind of groundbreaking at the time, and some of the aspects of it are a lot of fun. Like I was saying, the different abilities for each character and how they're each useful in different situations, and there's a little bit of strategy there, who you're going to initially take into the stage, when to switch out to who. And I think some fun can be had, but you're not going to finish this game. Buy this? No, don't buy it. Don't spend more than a couple of dollars, unless you want to just round out. If you got a collection going, you want to round it out, go ahead. You could do worse with the X-Men, much worse. But yeah, the games would get a little better as time went on. And this one had a sequel. I don't know if that's any better or not, but man, I don't know. Maybe watch a YouTube video instead of just because the controls are one of the most frustrating things. So just watch somebody else do it.
For me, I don't think I would recommend it to someone now. But back then, I don't think I can emphasize just how awesome it was to finally have a decent Xmen game at the time. I mean, after what we had been put through with just about every other comic book character licensed game through the NES and some of the Super NES and Genesis, this was a great game to finally be able to play the X-Men and have them represented well and look great. But I think that wears off over time because now it's just I don't know. I don't think anyone would have the patience to sit down nowadays and play through these levels. It's just it's not that good of a game. And X-Men 2 on the Genesis was a much, much better game. So if you're wanting some X-Men on the Genesis, I would recommend the sequel to this one. That is a much more straightforward game and just a lot better than this one.
Oh, and I almost forgot. It goes without saying. I did know this game for one thing. This game had a very bizarre puzzle-solving element to it, which I think it's pretty well known for. It had that whole reset thing to it. And I can't imagine as a kid encountering that and figuring out what to do.
None of us knew what to do. As far as I know, there was nothing mentioned anywhere that you have to reset your Sega Genesis. For anybody that doesn't know, I forget what the boss is, but once you beat him, you keep going into the level, and eventually you find a computer console that's kind of just materialized there, and you punch it, and it disappears, and then nothing happens. The stage doesn't end or anything. You just stand there. So if you're just playing this game and you don't know what you're doing, I mean, you're just kind of wandering around. You don't know, did you beat the stage? I don't know. You already beat the boss, and you hit this computer thing, and now everything's just going the way it is. But what you actually have to do, and this was even crazy back then, was you have to hit the reset button on the Sega Genesis. And then it will kind of bring up little boot, it's like booting up a computer or something. And you sit there and it reboots the game past that stage. So you literally have to reset your Sega Genesis to get past that stage. And I remember when I first heard about that, I couldn't believe it. I was just like, you got to be fucking kidding me. Even as a kid, I was like, this is bullshit. Why would I ever hit the reset button on a game that I spent, this is pretty far into the game, this much effort to get there? There's just no way you would have ever done it.
No, it sounds like some cruel joke your friends would pass around. Yeah, because it's pretty late in the game. It's like, hey, let's tell them to reset the thing. And then you're left staring at the title screen. But yeah, I don't know. And no, I don't think there are any hints or anything of that nature. I don't know. I mean, it's Simon's Quest level of figuring out something that you're not really given any notion as to what to do.
Unless it's in the instruction book somewhere, or maybe just mentioned. But I never got an instruction booklet with mine because I always rented it. And for some reason, the people at my video store just instantly threw out the instruction manuals to all their games. So I never got that. And I never got past that part. So once I did figure it out, I was like, fuck this. I'm never renting this game again anyway. But fuck you, Sega, for that one, because that is an asshole move. And even more of an asshole move because in the future, I think it was I can't remember which console. It was that one that you could plug the Genesis. It was the portable one, but you could plug the Genesis cart into the top of it.
The Sega Nomad.
The Nomad, yeah. It didn't have a reset button. So you couldn't actually finish the game on that console. So it's like you put this in here. It's reliant on literally the hardware to finish. And, if you've got you a Sega Nomad, you can't beat X-Men.
If you had a Sega Nomad, you had worse troubles than beating X-Men.
The Nomad came out late enough in the system life. Yeah, most likely, if you bought a Sega Nomad, you got it on sale, or you had more money than you knew what to do with, because there was no reason to buy the Nomad. Any game that had text, like if you're going to play Phantasy Star 2 or 3, you couldn't read that text on the Nomad. It was way too small. That was the problem with any of those handhelds. That system and the Turbo Express, any system that used the actual carts for a TV and put it on a smaller screen had problems with anything with text. But the Nomad also I think lasted 15 minutes with 17 batteries or something. So
I always wanted a Sega Nomad so bad though.
Well, Jeremy Gregory and I don't recommend this thing, but we want an opinion that matters.
Going with mine.
Jeremy P., how do you feel about it?
I would not recommend this to people who are not a fan of the X-Men at all. The game itself is pretty standard. The levels are kind of annoying. I mean, I didn't mind the first level as much, but the second level is where I really started going, oh, these mazes are going to irritate me. I better just use the teleporter constantly over and over again and not bother with any of these levels. That's why I would switch out. I would switch to another character to do boss fights or fight things because I didn't want to lose Nightcrawler's life. I wanted to make sure he was always good and healthy so I could jump through walls and save myself some time. But, if you are an X-Men fan, it's definitely better than the previous X-Men games. And I do like that again, every character kind of has their own flavor. It's not like you're just using a cutout of what looks like Wolverine, but all he can do is punch and kick. Like, everybody had their own unique abilities, which I did like. So if you're an X-Men fan, sure, go ahead and try it. I don't think it aged extremely well. Turn the volume all the way down. But if you are not, there's no reason to play this. So that is our thoughts on X-Men for the Sega Genesis. Next episode is going to go back to the PlayStation. We're going to cover Jumping Flash, one of the launch titles for the system. I have not played it since the system came out, so I'm looking forward to trying it again. But do we have any listener mail from our loyal listeners?
We do. We've actually got 2 today, although one is fairly short and shouldn't take us very long at all to answer. Let me pull this up here.
We say that every question, and then we talk for 25 minutes about what our favorite color is. So,
well, I think we won't have that problem with this question. All right. Ben writes in to ask a quick question. Do you guys get paid for this? And the answer is no. We do not get paid for this at all.
Not monetarily.
Yeah,
not with money, just with satisfaction. No, in fact, I'm spending money on this podcast, so I'm glad we're all enjoying it.
More money than anyone.
You guys had to buy microphones. I already had microphones for another podcast, but I'm paying to host this thing. So no, we're not making any money on this. But I don't think that. I didn't know if that was a question. It was an honest question, or was it one of those like, "Are you making money on this?" Like, if that how it was meant. Either way, the answer is no. No, we're not making any money on this. You're right. That was a very short question.
Yeah, we definitely we do this because we enjoy it. We've got some free time to do it here and there. So that is the main reason we do it. No money comes our way. We do not get any funding from like YouTube or anywhere else because, 13 people watch or listen to this stuff. So, no, we do not get paid. But anyway, the next question is, I know one that Billy has been looking forward to answering all week long. Terry writes in to ask, one thing that keeps coming up in these podcasts is the various Tiger Electronic games you all had as kids. We all know how bad they are now and how much they get made fun of on YouTube. But did you all actually enjoy playing these things back then? Could you really have fun playing a crappy game about MC Hammer? Or were you all just sad and had nothing else better to play?
I would be sad playing a crappy game about MC Hammer. But fortunately, that Tiger one was an excellent game about MC Hammer. But no, the Tiger games, I think, were just you had to be there at the time. If you picked one up now, obviously, and I've tried this with my son, the looks those things get now. Yeah, it's so archaic. Tiger games are tough to talk about, really, because it's just such a time capsule. And it's not like the old games. Like, you can go back to the NES and enjoy those games. You can go back to the Game Boy and enjoy those games. But the Tiger ones, I think I really genuinely had fun at the time because I didn't know any better. And it's hard to look back now and say, no, I didn't have fun, because I did. They were enjoyable. You go over to a friend's house, I'd have a sack with several of them in there. He'd have his. You dump them out. You'd have fun playing those things. Pretty much just competing for high scores and things like that. But you can't go back. you can't pick one up and still have a good time nowadays, except maybe that MC Hammer. I would love to get a working one of those again. If anybody wants, because obviously we just said we don't get paid. So if anybody wants to donate one, feel free. Hit me up on Miitomo and we'll talk about it.
Like Billy said, it was a certain place and time. And believe it or not, there was a time when the Game Boy didn't exist. I don't think any of us were under the impression that these things were amazing. Even back then, we were just like, these were small, cheap, portable games that did what they were supposed to do.
Yeah.
I mean, they cost about, what, $15-$20? You could buy one or two, take it in the car with you and play a game. I mean, there wasn't anything else that you could do something like that with back then. So Tiger Electronics was that hole that filled it. And of course there were millions of them and 90% of them were terrible. But the ones I had, I enjoyed playing for what they were.
Yeah. I mean, there were some good ones to be had. I think Jeremy and I owned the same Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles one, which was and it was neat looking too, because most of them had a standard shape to them. But this one had a different look, and it had a kind of a grip on the back of it, and it was green and a very odd shape. And I think it even there's a little voice to it, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, I mean, that one, MC Hammer. I had a tremendous Batman one, well, tremendous at the time. Yeah, and I even had a Snake's Revenge, and that one had like 4 or 5 voice clips to it. But at the time, come on. But I mean, as much fun as they were, there's no denying when the Game Boy came around, you put them down and you never picked them up again.
Yeah, once the Game Boy hit, that stuff was gone.
Yeah, the Game Boy was a game changer. I didn't have a lot of the Tiger handhelds myself. Some friends had those. I did have one of the LCD stand-up arcade machines. It was like not even a foot high, I guess, of Frogger.
Oh, I always wanted those.
I want one now so bad to make a lamp out of it, but I don't have one, and I'm not going to pay what they're asking for eBay on one. I'll find one somewhere in a junk store and rip the insides out and make a lamp. But otherwise, those games were poor versions of what even the Atari versions or the Intellivision versions of those games would have been at the time. But still, it was something about, that it was portable. You could take it in the car on a long trip. You could take it, and just sit upstairs while you're watching TV and play with it. Now that seems ridiculous because everyone has their phones that does a million things. But at the time, those things were amazing. But still, at least for me, always a poor version of what I could have even had on Atari. Just the portableness was the novelty.
Yeah. All right. Of course, we know my favorite. Did any favorites amongst the two of you?
Karnov. Because I really wanted the NES Karnov, and I ended up spending my money on something stupid. I think we talked about this in a previous podcast. So I had to settle on the Tiger LCD version of Karnov that I found for like $15. And
that's an awful lot of settling.
Yeah, it's once I blew that money, I wasn't getting it back, so I just had to do what I could, and I thought, well, maybe this will be sort of okay, because like we said, we weren't thinking that these games were going to compete with the the arcade or NES versions of a game. We just wanted to have a portable version of the game that maybe we couldn't afford the better version of. So that's that one was the one that I remember the most, and that Turtles game. I played that one a lot. But yeah, those are the two I think for me are my favorites.
The only one I remember playing a lot of and not liking, but I still played a lot of it, was the Double Dragon one, and I don't remember it being very good. But what I did like about the Tigers is that they looked good. The actual unit itself looked like a tiny, not a tiny arcade, but they made it so that it would have the arcade feel to the design of it. Like it would look, the graphics on it looked really good. The printed graphic on it, not the graphics on the screen. But that was, by itself, it's almost like, oh man, I got a cool box and a game. It wasn't just getting a cool game. Game Boy games, while they were super fun and they did have a label on the cart, once you plugged it in, it was just a gray cube and it played games and it was pretty fun. But I thought the Tiger ones looked much cooler, on the sitting still, not playing them. But I'd much rather play the Game Boy.
Yeah, it's kind of like having a neat looking toy that also played a bad game on it. So as a kid, that was that's all I needed.
I had that in my transforming Pac-Man watch.
What?
Remember that it was like it wasn't really Pac-Man, but it was a Pac-Man style game, and it was not even a transformer, but just a robot that would turn into a watch, and then it played a little game on it.
Oh yeah.
I had those. I had one of those. That was my LCD game, and it was the dumbest game ever. I think it was like you could move around in one of the 4 quadrants and just try to dodge things. It was the dumbest thing ever. But to have a watch that turned into a robot that also played a game, how do you get any cooler than that? You can't.
You don't.
So yeah, that's our favorite memories of the Tiger LCD games. Hopefully we covered enough of that to never go back to that topic again until we find a copy of the MC Hammer one that we will review.
We can finally have
full.
that MC Hammer podcast. That's
I feel like I would be upset if I didn't mention this. This isn't strictly the Tiger handheld, but you're speaking, I don't know if you know it, a proud owner of the R-Zone.
Oh.
And with these headsets being all the rage nowadays, I think maybe it's time for a resurgence. The R-Zone was pretty much a Tiger electronic that you strapped onto your head, and it projected instead of the black little LCD screen, you had red characters running around, and it introduced me to probably the worst headache I've ever had as a child. And I had one game. It was a fighting game. I don't know if they even made any other ones, but that was my actual last experience with a Tiger electronic. I mean, at this point, I think this was up in the Super Nintendo era. So, the Game Boy had a several years out at that point in time, but that gimmick was enough for me to give it a shot. Spent way too much on it, and it's still around somewhere. I don't know if it's in one piece or not.
That's kind of amazing to me. The fact that these Tiger Electronics things, you would think they would have died instantly as soon as the Game Boy came out. But those things kept going for years and years and years before they ever finally bit the dust. And I think the R-Zone was like the last thing that Tiger had to kind of maybe, throw out there to get some interest back in that stuff. But even then, the world had moved on. But it always amazed me that, like you said, even the Super NES days, I'd still see those Tiger Electronics toys just hanging there in the Walmart or something like that. It was crazy.
I think it was just it was a cost factor. You knew if you weren't a big gamer, like if you didn't already have interest in that hobby as a parent, and you were somewhere with a kid and you could find a game for $15 that'll keep them busy in the car for like a long day, then you'd pick that up. Why not? It's easier than buying at that point was Game Boy $100, and then each cartridge was $20 or $30. So if instead you were like, hey, here's $15, here's a game, have some fun. I think that's the market they were aiming at.
Yeah. Clearly this was for the I think the other big side of the market was aunt, uncle, grandparent who knows their kid likes video games and does not want to spring for a full price.
Yeah, I mean, those things were just cheap Easter basket toys at some point, for parents and grandparents that didn't know any better. They'd be like, hey, this is a Vigi game, so we're going to go ahead and give it to little Tommy over here. It's a fucking pink Mary-Kate and Ashley Tiger Electronics toy, but I've heard he likes Vigi games, so here you go.
That's it. Have fun. I hope you win. But obviously I'm just trying to stretch out this talk of Tiger all I can, but I think I'm out. I think I'm done.
Well, maybe we'll talk about it next week, because I'm pretty sure there was a amazing Jumping Flash Tiger Electronics game. But if not, we'll be talking about the PlayStation version of Jumping Flash. So check us out 2 weeks from now for the next episode, and look up for us on retrovania.net for other new articles in the meantime. And we'll see you then.